everybody, this is Jonah Pallone. I am helping out the Family Enterprise Center. We're doing light conversations. And today I have Christine Navant with me. Christine, thanks so much for being on.
Oh, I'm happy to be here.
Awesome. So Christine, why don't we just start with tell us a little bit about you and what business you own and what's
Okay.
that all like?
Well, I am a McDonald's owner operator, and I have been in the business now for almost 9.5 years. So I started actually 12 years ago because with McDonald's, you have to go through a training program, which takes about two years, maybe 3 years, depending on how many hours. It's about a 2,000 hour commitment. You learn from the back of the house all the way to the front, from offloading trucks to managing schedules to scrubbing bathrooms. So you
Wow.
spend 2 intense years learning everything about the business. So I started about 12 years ago with the interview. And you know what? Back then, it was about 1 in 1,000 people that were entered into the program. So I was a little bit up in age when this happened. My husband is an orthodontist, and it was during the financial crisis when his practice struggled a little bit. So we wanted to have a backup plan. And my brother and father have been in the McDonald business for over 30 years. So my brother recommended I go through the registered applicant program and just see if it would work out for us. And little did I know that it was a great journey. And here we are. I now own 7 restaurants, have over 400 employees. And so it's a success story, no doubt.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And we're going to unpack a lot of what you just said.
Yeah.
When you heard that number, I mean, what went through your head? Did you question your ability to be able to do this? Like,
Well, thankfully, Jonah, I didn't know that number until I had already interviewed. So, and there's definitely I had a leg up because my older brother, who owns 43 restaurants now, at the time, he still is considered and well respected in the McDonald's community. So, I'm sure that helped when he said my sister is coming to interview. And initially, my husband and I interviewed together as a couple, and McDonald's Corporation, they don't really like couples doing it. You can go in after a spouse can become an operator, but they didn't want us to do the registered applicant program together.
got it.
And my husband would have had to have given up his orthodontic practice. So we would have cut off all income because the training is you do it with no pay. So that's a challenge for a lot of families to have to give up their pay for 2 years to do that.
Hmm.
So that's why I decided to go into it by myself.
Got it. Yeah. So that was I mean, that must have been a huge leap of faith at the time. I mean, obviously you had the orthodontist job, right? That was kind of a secured
Mhm.
situation, but I'm
Right.
sure you must have felt like you were taking a leap of faith.
Well, no doubt a leap of faith when you think about at that time I was in my late 40s, and I had been a stay-at-home mom for 2 years. So to think about going from packing lunches, and I was on the board of trustees for the school, which is about the most business thing I had been doing. To go from that to running a multi-million dollar business, it does create a little angst. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah.
So, but I think I've always told my children, you've got to work hard. You've got to take some risk and take some challenges. So I think it was a great opportunity for me to be a role model to them of exactly what I was asking them to do during, such influential years, because my oldest son was in high school getting ready to go off to college, and so he was watching his mother get up at 5:30, go do this training, come home, run a family. And so I think it gave me a great opportunity to show my children what I was expecting of them.
Yeah, absolutely. So I have so many questions for you. I
Yeah.
guess let's just start with when you got started.
Mhm.
So you go through this training. Are you going to other McDonald's and basically just learning all aspects of the business? Walk me through what that process was into getting your first franchise.
At the beginning, what they do is they pair you up with an organization, and they ask you to spend the majority of your first maybe year and a half, 2 years with them. So I worked with one restaurant, one operator for the first 2 years. And I had a schedule. I submitted it into McDonald's. They had a corporate person who was like a partner for me. And they would come, and I went to all the training that all managers go through. all the way up through what you've probably heard of, Hamburger University. Little do I know that I went to Texas A&M for undergraduate, and I went to graduate school at the University of North Texas. Little did I know that my 2-week Hamburger University was going to trump all my other education. So anyway, but I did that for a year and almost 2 years. Then they send you out to other organizations. You go to see how another, because we all run our businesses differently.
Hmm.
So it gives you that opportunity to have that peek under the tent. Well, how does this operator run their business, look at their P&Ls? I also spent about 6 months with the McCopco, which are company-owned McDonald's. And just they send you to all the meetings. It's a full-time commitment.
Mm.
And once I graduated from HU and I completed my training, which was probably a little over 2 years, I had to wait then for a store to come available that would be a desirable location for our family. So at the time when I was getting in the business, they were few and far between. So the first one that I looked at was in Alabama, and I didn't even go look at it because I knew there was no way I could move my family. I had Suzanne was in elementary school. I had a middle schooler and a high schooler. There was no way I was going to move our family.
Mm.
So we didn't even look at that. Like Buffalo, New York was available. And it was just just a godsend. I am a woman of faith, and I believe that the dear Lord had his hand in my trajectory, because I went to a worldwide convention with my brother, and I ran into an operator there who owns several stores in the Hickory Market, about an hour and 15 minutes from me. And he mentioned to me that he might be selling one of his restaurants.
Got it.
So I jumped on that immediately, the emails back and forth, because an hour and 15 minutes was a drivable distance for me. And my kids could stay in school, my husband could continue practicing. And that's how it started. He sold me a restaurant. It was a low performer. He was trying to get rid of it to buy a bigger restaurant and to get the cash to do that, which kind of is part of the best part of my journey here, is that as a result of getting my foot in the door in that market, which was an hour from me, the McDonald's offered me the next big restaurant that this man was selling his for to get the cash flow. And he is thanking himself for letting me in the market. So here I am, 9 years later, and not only did I get the next biggest restaurant in the Hickory Market, but then the 3 operators that are all there, this is the way the system works. You all have to interview to build the next one that was being opened. So not only did I get that one, but the 3 operators, we all got together and we had to bid on the next location, and I got that one too.
Got it. Yeah, it's so funny because it's such a similar thing to real estate, right? When you're a real estate investor, you're going to want to take at a certain point, you're going to eventually take away and sell your lower performing deals, but that allows other people to get into the market. It's kind of the cycle of life, it seems.
Well, the other thing I think that it circles back to is that you have to position yourself financially to not allow that to happen. So I learned a very powerful lesson then. And my husband and I have always been, fairly frugal in terms of, just always saving for tomorrow. So the first month that I was an operator, I can remember getting that check. And here I had been a stay-at-home mom for 20 years, and I'd get this first check the first month, which was probably more than I had ever made in a year. So what would your first instinct be? Let's go out and buy a new car. We're going to get a beach house. And that's the mistake that a lot of people do. They get into business, they start to see that cash flow, and they immediately spend it. So we put that money away, and within 4 months, I was offered the next McDonald's. So I had that cash to put
reserve cash. Mm-hmm. That's awesome.
Advantage of that opportunity.
Got it. Yeah, that's awesome. So you mentioned Suzanne and your children, and that's kind of, we're doing a family business show for UNC. So
Right.
Highlighting that a bit more, I mean, you started your family business, right? So,
Right.
I mean, your brother and your father, were in the McDonald's family, obviously, but you really started your own kind of unit. How has that been? I mean, talk to me about some of those dynamics with teaching the kid. Obviously, you went through a major learning process when
Mhm.
you first bought the first McDonald's all the way up to now. How are
Right.
you kind of showing your children the way? Are there any rules you've put in place? Are they going to come into the family business? What are your plans, right? Just talk me
Well,
through it.
one of the great and what I was thinking, of course, as a mother, is this is going to open a door for my children to not have to be one in 100,000. So, and those numbers I think have changed a little bit now, but they automatically have an opportunity to be what they call a next gen. So they have to go through a very rigorous training as well to prove to McDonald's that they could take on this business and not run it into the ground. So there's a program called the Next Gen, and it's about the same thing, about 2 to 3 years of McDonald's creating them and testing them. So that was, that made me feel really good that I could do that. Because my husband is an orthodontist. You have to go and become an orthodontist, and none of my children wanted to do that. So I knew this would be a great backup plan for my kids. So we do have a rule in our family, though, that all three of them have to leave the nest and go work for somebody else for at least 2 years. And I think that's a good way for them to see what it's like to take direction from someone else and not to walk in the door and be the boss. Because there's a huge difference from what I went through and what they will go through, because automatically they will have the respect of all of my people because they will be like an owner. They already do. They go in and work in the summers and they're treated way differently. So we want them to go out. And my oldest son works for Goldman Sachs. He's been there for, gosh, almost 5 years now. And then Suzanne just got a job with Goldman Sachs. And then my son, John, who's the middle child, all three of them are working in New York.
Okay.
So they'll all, hopefully, Suzanne has the greatest interest to come back. She said she's putting in her 2 years and coming back because she wants to be able to be a mom and have a business as well, like I have.
That's beautiful. That's awesome. Um, there's so many places I could go. We have such a short time. But you mentioned the 2-year rule, right? And this is
Mhm.
something that's come up, I know, in family business class before.
Right.
How did you find out about that? Do you seek out resources? Are you reading books? Are you listening to podcasts? Did someone show you kind of a mentor situation?
I think that a lot of this just goes back to my husband and I have a pretty strict uh, parenting, a way of parenting. And that is just setting my children up for success by wanting them to be successful on their own. You talk
Mhm.
about when you give somebody too much, and we've had the privilege, even, when they were younger, when, my husband always had a very good income. We just wanted them to learn what it's like to earn something, and that feeling of achieving it instead of someone handing it to them. And I think that's why all three of them have been very successful on their own, completely outside of McDonald's. So, with that being said, I know that I could hand the reins over to someone who would take very good care of a business that, there has been a lot of hard work going into, developing these 7 stores and getting up. Like this morning, even my phone rang at 5:30 in the morning. And, it doesn't happen often, but we had a little bit of an issue at one of my restaurants. And, my kids will be up and out. So that's why I think that that's my way of setting them up for success in the same way that I set my businesses up for success.
Mhm. And how do you manage? I mean, how do you plan on managing when Suzanne, for example, comes back after her 2 years? Sometimes I've heard there's a bit of an awkwardness that
Mhm.
comes into play. And I've heard, stories of, well, I went in and my kids came into the business and I didn't want it to be awkward. So I had them do every single task within the business to learn it. Right. What's sort of the plan to avoid that awkwardness? Or have you thought about that?
They will definitely do every step that I did, because that's in order to be a good operator, you have to understand what your people are doing. I have to understand what it's like to offload a truck or go in and count inventory in the freezer. It makes you a much more compassionate leader. I would never ask anyone in my organization to do anything I would not be willing to do. So my children have to feel that. And I don't think they'll have a problem with that at all. And not only that, but it helps you understand how to give direction. If you walk in as a leader and you just start shouting commands and you don't show them that you understand how to do it, they won't respect you.
Hmm.
So I want them to go in and mop a floor and stand in a drive-through and hand out for 6 or 7 hours. And I remember there were days when I would leave my training and I'd be driving home and my feet would hurt and, my back would hurt. And I remember thinking, Lord, don't ever let me lose sight of this feeling, because that will make me a better operator when I go in and know what my people are doing for me.
Mm.
So I want my children to experience that and feel it. So they will all do that. We have a very planned out business plan for our children. It's divided financially. They're already a part of. We have a family business, a limited partnership right now, so it's already going into their names equally, and then they will earn based on what they put into the business. So they're already 50% owners with me, but they'll have to
They're
earn.
going to earn it.
Yeah, they're going to
Yeah.
earn the other part of it too. If they choose to stay in New York, they're not getting, the full cut.
Yep. That's cool. That's cool. So circling back to the business a little bit more, one of the things about you that I find super fascinating and powerful is that you have managed to go from an owner operator to now you're kind of leveling yourself upward, pulling
Mhm.
yourself out of the business, probably as a result of working on the business a lot.
Right.
That's sort of my biggest question, right? When you came in, you had your first restaurant.
Right.
How did you start the scaling process to the second one and to the third one and to the fourth? And was there a certain point at which you elevated kind of your positioning and understood now you're managing? Kind of walk me through the scaling
Right.
of it.
Well, when you get your first restaurant, you don't have the money to have like what I have now, where I have someone who's in charge of technology and I have someone who's, we are able to delegate and work through strong people now. When I first started, I was in the restaurant almost every day, driving the hour and 15 minutes and back. So I grew very quickly, which is uncommon in this business. But I opened my second restaurant in October, got my first one in April. And by October, I staffed and trained and opened my second restaurant. So at that point, I was working like 60 hours a week. It was just a lot of work because I didn't have the talent at that point either. This business is not where you can hire someone off the street and say, come on in, you're going to be a supervisor. It kind of goes back to what I was saying. You have to go through every step and understand what it's like to come in and run that business. So I opened my second store in October. So within less than a year, we had 2 restaurants. That
Wow.
today is my highest volume restaurant. That store was projected to do $2.6 million, and we do $5 million right now in sales, if you can imagine.
Wow.
So our opening day, we held the record, and we still hold the record in the Raleigh region for the highest opening day sales. We did almost $20,000 in one day.
Wow.
And it felt like a train wreck because we had all these new people and the parking lot was backed up. We can do that today and you wouldn't even think. It just runs like a fine oil machine. So, there's just a lot of experiences that owners have to go through, and experiencing what I did and learning what it's like to train up 65 employees, and that true grit that it took me to do that. I want my children to feel that, not to just have me tell them about it. So my husband and I, he was working as an orthodontist and he'd come at night and on the weekends to help me till we got on our feet. So the first 2 restaurants, I had general managers. Some McDonald's operators don't even do that because that position pays around $50,000. So some operators would prefer to just, when they have one, to be their GM. So I had my 2 GMs. I opened my third restaurant 2 years after that. At that point, I hired a supervisor, and that helped me kind of, delegate and work through them. I have very good general managers. That's probably one of the greatest things I have. And then I bought 4 restaurants at one time in the Asheville market, and I developed 2 supervisors and a director of operations. So I remember sitting the corporation said, you can't be in your restaurant all day. When you're running a business of this magnitude, you really have to be managing from up here,
Mhm.
looking at your numbers, because it's a small margin business as well. So when you're looking at this kind of money, you have to really watch it carefully.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's a lot there too. So many things to talk about.
I know.
Um,
Oh,
so I guess one thing is you're hiring the general managers. This is just a selfish personal question. How,
mhm.
I've seen business owners where they get sucked into the business and they can't pull themselves out, right? They're on the ground, boots on the ground every day, all inside the business. It can't run without them. How did
Right.
you, was there a level of trust you had to build with the general managers, and how did you find those people?
Well, there's no doubt that you have to trust them because they're dealing with thousands of dollars a day in your cash and your deposits. There have been a couple, I've been burned a couple of times, not much. But I do feel like you need to develop from within. The general managers have to go to HU, do all the training that I did. So that's something that doesn't happen overnight either.
Mm,
I have fast tracked a couple of people and I've regretted it. So I have developed, I right now have in some of my stores, I have a bench where if I lose one, I've got a backup plan because you don't ever want to be working from behind. That's where I got in, that's where it was struggling when I opened and went to 3 restaurants right away. I was really having to work from behind. So today I every time I have an opportunity and I see some talent, I develop it. I find a place for them, whether it be in charge of technology or, like I say, I've got all kinds of ways to delegate. And as I get older, I'm happy to say, hey, I'll let you try this, and I'll just follow up and make sure it's going well.
yeah. And you mentioned, so you have 7 locations,
I do.
and some are in Asheville, some are in the Raleigh-Durham market.
Mhm.
How do you manage your time? I mean, obviously now you've elevated up, so you don't have to be there every day,
Right.
but how do you
Right.
manage your time between them or among them?
So what I do is I try to be, my husband is going in during the pandemic. My husband goes in every day to one of the restaurants. My director of operations is in every single restaurant several times a week. So I'm running my business during this pandemic, which has been eye opening too, because I was in the restaurants every day. Once this happened, at my age, I thought, well, we see, up to 2,000 customers a day in these restaurants. So talk about, lots of movement. I decided to run my business from exactly what you and I are doing. I Zoom call all my managers. I have cameras, high definition cameras in all my restaurants. I haven't made a French fry in 1 year. And my business is still doing just fine. So maybe I'm going to come out ahead from this. I've actually enjoyed that. I'm not driving to Raleigh. I'm not driving to, all of my business meetings are like in Atlanta and Raleigh and Greenville. So that's been nice too. It's been very efficient.
That's good. So this show is called Light Conversations, and one of the reasons why it's called Light Conversations is we hope that whoever's listening, light bulbs go off when they listen to us, right? So what are some? I mean, back up a little bit. There's operators. I'm sure you've seen a wide variety of owner operators in terms
Absolutely.
of skill level, right? Kind of fade out and become unsuccessful and are really super uber successful.
Right.
What are some principles, things that you've learned along the way that really, like you said, it was projected to be 2.4 million in sales and it was
Right.
5.
Right.
What, how do you manage better? What are some of those principles?
Well, I think some of it circles back to what you and I talked about earlier in that, these people come to work every day to make me very successful. I don't see them as a number, my employees. They mean something to me. This is a people business. I believe that respect that you show to the people that are in there every day, to your point, boots on the ground. I know what it's like to do that. So I never manage from that come in, lower the boom. And there are a lot of operators that choose to do it that way. Um, I drive the parking lot all the way around. I sit in the parking lot like I'm on my phone to give them a few minutes to, if you're have your phone or a drink out or something, make sure you put it away so that I can walk in to a really positive environment. I never come in if the drive-through is back to the street. I walk in and I say, put me to work. Where can I help you? And then we dig out of whatever we're in the middle of, and we sit down and say, okay, maybe how can we avoid this, from happening again? I don't think in the 9 years that I've owned restaurants, I don't think I've ever said an ugly thing to anybody. I treat everyone the way I want to be treated, the way I want my children to be treated. And it takes a lot of us coming together. And the other thing you have to understand is a restaurant can change on a dime. You could have everything under control, the lobby immaculate, and you can get a bus of baseball players that come in with muddy cleats and trash your lobby. And so I always assume innocence when I walk in, and it has worked for me. Most of my higher level people have been with me from the beginning, and we are a partnership. So I believe in treating people well, because without them, I couldn't do this. I also believe in setting our people up for success. As a restaurant operator, I know that training is critical for my GMs to be successful. So I'm very big on making sure they're up to date on all the training, giving them the time to go to meetings. I put them on bonus programs so that we share. When I do well, they do well, and it gives them that feeling of accountability. I think of myself in many ways as a mentor to them, but there are days when I walk out of that restaurant and little do I know that they've mentored me. So I have a beautiful relationship with all of the leaders in my restaurant.
That's
So
awesome.
I think that's the key. At the beginning, I knew every employee. I knew every dog, everyone's spouse's name. Now, I don't,
Well, too
that
big
doesn't
now.
happen. I'll walk into a restaurant and say, "Hey, how long have you been here?" And they'll go, "I've been here for a year." I'm like, "Oh, that never happened in the beginning." So
That's a good problem to
it's all
have, right?
good. And I also ask my leaders, I say, I want you to treat our people the way I treat you. And it goes right back to what I said about the shadow of a leader as a mom. I ask my children to do something, but I've always told them you are the average of the 5 people with whom you spend the majority of your time.
Mm,
And I believe as an owner operator, I am the average of the leaders that I have in my restaurant because they're a reflection of me. And I ask them to also treat my customers that way because that's what brings them back.
absolutely. All right, I want to wrap up here. So we've got a couple more questions left. One is another selfish question. I'm a big bookworm. Any sort of books, podcasts, things that you're listening to or reading that were really impactful for you?
Well, that would be a question for my brother, or my brother is constantly, because every book that I read, the best book in the whole world is the Bible, because
Yeah,
that's what I spend I and I can truly say that the majority of the business skills that I have are biblically based. I mean, when you really think about it, it's what you cast upon the water comes back tenfold. And, how do you love thy neighbor? I really believe that if you dig down to everything that's made me very successful, and not in a braggadocious way, but like our organization is one of the top in the country right now in terms of operations, stability with people. And I believe it circles back to the way we treat them. So I don't listen to a lot of podcasts, and I Time Power, those kind of books that are just really simple. I believe in those because I'm a very efficient, stay ahead of the game person. I believe that running a good business, and I jokingly said I was a stay-at-home mom for 20 years before I became an operator. The same principles that made me a successful mom have made me a successful operator, because it's the same thing: being prepared, showing up on time, making sure that you set your kids up for success. I set my people up for success. So quite honestly, I think sometimes we search for all of these magic pills, and it's really very simple, just basic fundamental.
I love that. I was going to ask you, what advice do you have for family business students in the program, but you basically just gave it.
Mhm.
So I
Yeah,
think we'll end there. I think that's
yeah.
good. Thank you
I've
so much,
enjoyed my
Christine.
time with you,
Yeah, this has been awesome. This has been awesome. All righty.
and good luck to you. I look forward to hearing how things are going for you too.
Yeah, we'll talk. We'll talk.
Okay. Take
Thank you
care.
so much. Bye bye.
Uh-huh. Bye-bye.